Hi, and welcome to the Build Your Own Data Logger course, brought to you by WILDLABS and Freaklabs. I'm Jacinta from Freaklabs. This is Module 3, the Command Line submodule, Lab 2. In Lab 1, we installed the Command Arduino library, and we went through the library functions that we'll be using moving forward. Command.begin, command.add, command.poll, and writing command functions. We also wrote our first command, Hello Command Line. In Lab 2, we're going to go deeper into how the command function takes in and handles arguments. An argument is a value that's passed into the command or function. A parameter is a special kind of variable that can be set by the user, for example through the command line. The easiest way to think about it is a parameter is the variable and the argument is the value that's passed into it. So we're going to be writing a command that lists its own arguments so we can better understand how to reference our arguments. We're then going to go into how we can change parameters by passing in arguments through the serial monitor and set the date on a pretend real-time clock and retrieve it, all via the serial console. We'll get into using the real-time clock in submodule 4. Before we begin, let's do a quick refresher on some programming concepts that we'll be using. There are 4 data types that we'll come across. The first is a character. And a character is a data type used to store a single character, which might be a letter, a space, a number, or a symbol. A string is a series of characters and can also contain letters, spaces, numbers, and symbols. An integer is a number with no decimal point. It can be positive, negative, or 0. A floating point number, or a float, is a number with a decimal point that moves or floats. Another concept we'll be looking at is arrays. An array is a group of related data values called elements. The array elements, or values, must be the same data type. When declaring an array, we specify the data type, the array name, and the array length. We access the elements or values in the array via the element's index, or its position within the array. The index count starts from 0. Let's look at something that's a little bit more concrete. If we type list hello command line into the serial monitor, we're creating an array called args with 4 elements: list, hello, command, and line. To access each of these elements, we use the corresponding index. So if, for example, we wanted to access list, we would write args 0. If we wanted to access hello, we would type args 1, and so on. Finally, let's look at a for loop. A for loop is used to repeat a specific block of code a certain number of times, and it's often used to loop through an array. So we create an integer variable called I. We set it to 0, and then we compare whether it's less than the array length. If it is, we add 1 to it. Then we execute the code, and we go back and repeat that loop until our variable I is equal to the array length, in which case whatever was in our for loop stops running. In the last module, we wrote a command hello function and we passed it 2 arguments, argCount and args. Let's understand these a bit more. ArgCount is the number of the arguments we're passing to the function through the serial monitor. It gives us the array length for the array args and defaults to 1, which is the command keyword or the first word we type. Args is an array of strings called args, and it takes each word we've typed as an element of its array. If we type list hello command line into the serial console, it creates an array called args with the elements list, hello, command, and line. What we type into the serial console is a string. What happens if we want to pass a number into our application? We need to convert the string into a number. So we do this via the command.convert function and accessing the element we want to change in the args array. Now let's get into some code. We're going to write a command that lists its own arguments so we can better understand how to reference arguments. Then we're going to write a command that sets the date of our pretend real-time clock. So open up the Arduino IDE, connect your board, and let's start coding. In Arduino, create and save a new sketch. Just as in the previous lab, we're going to use the #include macro to bring in the command Arduino library. We can either code it manually or insert it by going to Sketch, Include Library. In the setup function, we start again with command.begin and pass the baud rate. Next, we're going to print out a short title label to the serial console. This serves a few purposes. We know what code we've loaded into the device, that the code is running okay, and that the serial port and hardware are working okay as well. Next, we add our command, which we'll call list, and map it to a function called command list. In the loop, we put our polling function, which checks to see if any command has been entered into the serial console. Now it's time to create our command function. As usual, we start with void, followed by the function name. We need this to match what we specified in the command.add function in the setup, which in this case is command list. Then we add the two arguments, arg_count and arg. Inside the command function, we'll create a for loop that loops through all the elements in our args array and prints them to the serial console. We'll print out both the argument number and the actual argument. Once that's done, we verify our code can compile by clicking the tick in the top left corner. Then we check we have the correct board selected by going to Tools, Board and selecting Wildlogger, and the correct port by going to Tools, Port. Then we download our code to the board, and once that's done, we open up our serial monitor. We should see our title header, and if we press Enter, our command line. Let's enter a test command and send some arguments. We can see that the command name is always the 0 in our array. Then each element shows up sequentially. Let's try it one more time with Hello command line. We can see now how the arguments are passed into the command line library and how to reference each of the elements in our args array. Now, let's take our existing command list sketch and save it as a new one. Then we'll add another command in the setup function called setDate that calls the command setDate function. We leave command.poll the same and move down under the command list function to add our setDate function. We're going to assume that the user will enter the command keyword, setDate, then the year, then the month, then the day, so it looks like this. In the setDate function, we first set up the function with the usual arguments. Then we create a variable called year and assign it as an integer. We convert the year string into a number by using the command.convert function and referencing args1, the first word after the keyword. Then we do the same with the month and the day. Then we print it all out. We check and verify our code, check our board and port are selected, then download it to our board. Then we open the serial monitor. Let's check our command list is still working. Now let's set the date by typing setDate, all lowercase, space, then the year, month, and day, separated by a space also. The serial console then returns the date. Congratulations! Now that we understand how to pass and access variables, we'll be looking at controlling our application in real time in Lab 3. See you in the next video.